Subjects that perhaps many of you have seen in the popular press, ideas of forced marriage, arranged marriage. Already in London alone, the British government has set up a bureau for the investigation and retrieval for girls that have been forced into marriage. Number one, forced marriage is not permissible in Islam. There is an occasion where there was a girl who was forced to marry her cousin. And this girl came to the Prophet Muhammad and complained and said, "Oh God's messenger, my father has forced me to marry this man, and I don't like him." And the Prophet Muhammad said, "Then the marriage is null and void, if that is something that you did not agree to." At which point the girl then said, "I now agree to the marriage, but I wanted it to be made known that Muslim women can marry who they want to marry, and their fathers cannot force them to marry." The popular perception of Muslim women is one of women forced to conform to desires, weaknesses, jealousies of men, beaten, barefoot, pregnant, uneducated, and consigned away from all human contact. In reality, many of the injustices that Muslim women are forced to undergo is not because of Islam, but culture. And it's unfortunately that culture and Islam have been mixed in together. So because many people see that young girls are forced to marry someone, they immediately believe that this is something that is legislated under Islamic law when Islamic law is against it. As I said earlier, Islamic law is against female genital mutilation. But just because Muslims do it doesn't mean it allows it. The respect of one's wife is further enshrined when one looks at some of the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad. He said, "Treat women with the greatest concern, for their welfare is subject to your goodwill. You have taken them under your cares and trust in God, and their bodies have been made lawful to you. By the word of God, you have rights over them, and they have rights over you." And unfortunately, this is a failure of the Islamic scholars today, that they love to tell Muslim men about their rights, but they never tell Muslim women about their rights. The Prophet Muhammad said that those believers with the most perfect faith, who merit the seats closest to me, are those who are the kindest to their families. Who do I love the most? There's an occasion when a man came to the Prophet Muhammad and he said, who do I love the most? He said, "Your mother." And he said, "What about after that?" He said, "Your mother." He said, "Who then?" He said, "Your mother." And he said, "Who then?" He said, "Your father." The mother's position in Islam is unprecedented. Her love, care, and obedience to her is something that is enshrined in the words of the Prophet Muhammad. Once the Prophet Muhammad said that you will never pay your mother back for even one kick in her womb. Not one. So the ill treatment that Muslim women have is not because of the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad or the Quran, but it is because, number one, Islamic scholars have not properly educated the Muslim masses, and the Muslim masses have been prior Islamic culture even in Islam. The Prophet Muhammad went on to say, fathers, called on fathers to be good with their daughters, to ensure they were educated. To oppress and neglect daughters in favor of sons is un-Islamic and goes against the very sayings and actions and deeds of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, any man that has a daughter and raises her, educates her, and sees that she marries a good man will be like this with me on the day of judgment. Islam does not father boys. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also that the obtainance of Islamic knowledge was something that was applicable upon all of Muslims, male and female. He said, seeking knowledge is a mandate for every Muslim. From the early days of Islam, Muslim women also pioneered the preservation of Islamic law and its education amongst the masses. The best of examples is the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, Aisha. Aisha was what we would call in Islam a mushtahid mutlaq, meaning that she could make independent legal rulings without depending on somebody else. Ibn Hajar, in his Islam, says the following: anytime we found something difficult to understand and asked Aisha about it, we found that she is the most knowledgeable about the matter. Ata ibn Rabi said of her, of all the people, Aisha anha was the one with the most extensive legal knowledge. The process of making Islamic rulings is extensive and covers some of the basic following. Drawing to a conclusion. For you to make an Islamic legal ruling, you have to know some of the aspects of the revelation of the Quran, why it was revealed, when it was revealed, which verses have been abrogated by each other, all the actions and sayings of the Prophet Muhammad. You have to know the life of the Prophet Muhammad, which actions and sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, which actions and sayings have been abrogated by each other or the Quran. You should have a fuller knowledge and understanding of Arabic language. These are just the basic elements for issuing Islamic legal codes. Today, Aisha is an inspiration to Muslim women around the world, furthering in the field of Islamic scholarship in new areas. And if you actually look at the rate of Muslim women who graduate with Bachelor of Sciences and Bachelor of Engineering, it actually precedes many Western countries. Western countries are in a minority to Muslim countries. For example, in Tunisia, a country where 98% of people practice Islam, there was 5% more female students enrolled than males in higher education. Malaysian women make up 55% of the enrolled population in higher education. If education is free, then some Muslim women in Bahrain are more liberated than American. This is an article that's actually written by a Christian American. If you look at the graduates in science, Bahrain 74% of women, Bangladesh 24%, Brunei 49%, Kyrgyzstan 64%, compared to America only 43%. Women graduates in engineering, Morocco 25%, outnumbering America, only 19%. The fact is the United States falls behind 6 Muslim countries in the percentage of women graduating in science to the total science graduate population. The countries whose ratios of women science graduates exceeds that of the United States are Bahrain, Dar es Salaam, Kyrgyzstan, Lebanon, Qatar, and Turkey. Morocco exceeds the United States in the ratio of women engineering graduates as a percentage of the science graduate population. One of the most notable scholars of Islamic history, Ahmed ibn Taymiyyah, listed his aunt Satiya al-Dara bin Abdul Salam along with 3 other women as 4 of the many scholars he studied and learned with. So some of the most preeminent Islamic scholars throughout history studied with female scholars. I myself am an example of that. As I said at the beginning, I studied Islamic law in Morocco, but I actually studied under the tutelage of a female alim. Her name was Alima Fatima, and she was the one who taught me the legal codes of Islam. So I am one of the few people who actually learned from an Islamic female scholar. Much has been played out in the media about the abuse of women. In reality, the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad do not demand that women to be physically suppressed. In fact, the Prophet himself spoke out against domestic violence. He said, refrain from giving her a slap on the face or abusing her. This includes physical and psychological abuse. Every 12 seconds in the United States, a woman is subjugated to this scourge. Every 12 seconds, a woman is beaten, in some cases, to the point of death by her husband or a wife. Now, how far do the rights of women go in Islam? Let's have a guess. I want to see some raised hands. Becoming critics on it. How many people can tell me how far the rights of women go in Islam? Don't be shy. Come on. How far?
It goes just along with the men.
Along with men? Good answer. Anybody else? Or is anybody too shy? Well, for the Muslims in the audience, let me just say this. The Prophet Muhammad said, Hayat al-Din. There is no shame in Islam. Meaning to explain the thing for the betterment and the implementation of Islam in one's personal life, there is no shame in covering personal issues.
I'd say most Muslim women and men equally are lacking rights. So, there's no requirements there. Just hope people lacking rights in their own country.
Because they're not implementing.
Sorry?
That's because they're not implementing.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. The rights of the Muslim go even to here. The marriage bed. Now, a lot of the Muslims are getting, probably some of the Muslim women getting